Wonderful. Thank you so much. So just by way of a brief introduction, I'm Nessa Richmond. I'm the Network Director of the Rhode Island Food Policy Council, and we are supporting the Rhode Island Department of Health in this Hunger Elimination Task Force meeting. So first I want to get started by reviewing the goal of the Hunger Elimination Task Force. So Max, you can forward to the next slide. The goal of this task force is to reduce hunger and increase access to healthy and culturally appropriate food for all Rhode Island residents. And you can go ahead and advance to today's agenda. Thank you so much. So today, after our welcome and a few announcements, we are going to get an update from Director of Food Strategy, Julie Stelmasic, about Relish Roti and what's going on with our state food strategy right now. Then we're going to have a policy landscape review and update from our Senior Program Associate, Max DeFaria. We are going to then have a wonderful panel about food donation that will be moderated by Randy Bellhumer from the Department of Health. And then, as always, we'll be going into a breakout session where you can all have take part in a conversation about what you heard in the panel and what you believe it means for you, your work, and your community. So to move us ahead, I'm going to hand it over to Julie to share about Relish Roti.
Okay, thanks, Nessa. So hi, everyone. Apologies if you've already heard me talk about this at some of the other meetings, but we have yet to kind of bring this process to the Hunger Elimination Task Force. So you can just, if you don't mind, Max, go to the next slide. So I just want to briefly share some of the kind of goals and process of this planning process that the state is going to be leading. We are leading. It's already started in the next year. So hopefully everyone recalls that our kind of 1.0, our food strategy, was launched in 2017 with these 5 focus areas. And my position was created to support and oversee the implementation of these goals. A lot has happened since that time. And in fact, even the Hunger Elimination Task Force, which we have today, was actually a strategy that came out of that initial food strategy under Sue Anderbaugh. And so it's pretty amazing that it's continued and grown. And it's really thanks in large part to the Food Policy Council and RIDO for continuing to grow this, this partnership. So I just want to mention, I think on the next slide, I just want to share a little bit about how we're thinking about this and kind of who will lead this process, who owns it, who gets to have say, and et cetera. So we've established a steering committee, and you can see the people who sit on that. Myself and some colleagues at Rhode Island Commerce, the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, the Department of Health, Department of Environmental Management, and the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. And so we've been working to kind of figure out, what do we want to do? What does this look like? And kind of what's the process so that we can make sure that it's democratic and involves the stakeholders that our food system impacts, of course, all of you. And so in addition to the steering committee, we will establish an advisory board, kind of a planning board of about maybe 20 stakeholders, leaders, and representatives across the food system. The focus will certainly be on folks working in Rhode Island, but we also want to bring a regional perspective. And so we're certainly encouraging those that work, more regionally, including Rhode Island, to apply. And we also don't want to just narrow it to only food system folks or people in the food industry, but food adjacent, leaders and stakeholders as well. And then the IFNPAC, the Interagency Food, Nutrition, and Policy Council, will also be kind of weighing in on that process. And on the next slide, just briefly, I wanted to share some of the ways that we're thinking about this. Is we really got inspired by Vermont Farm to Plate, which is sort of like the Relish Roti of Vermont. They started that in 2010, so they're a few years ahead of us. And they just updated their plan. And we really liked the way that they approached it by having these product, market, and issue briefs to really look at the food system in these different areas and dig into, I think they had 54. We will not be doing 54, but this is what we'll kind of tackle over the summer with a consultant and partners actually in the food system to really kind of level set, like, where are we now and where do we want to go? And then that will all get rolled up into the objectives and goals. The steering committee is really prioritizing metrics, things that we can continue to measure over time. It will bring us out to 2030, so it's a little bit of a longer strategy. Oftentimes we see across other states that these happen kind of in 10-year chunks with incremental kind of updates. And actually right now we've already engaged in hiring a consultant to do a 5-year look back. And I just want to say thank you. I know a lot of you have spoken to our consultant at Northbound Ventures. And so in June, we'll actually have this kind of reflection and this look back at the last 5 to 6 years, so we can take an honest look at what's working and what's not. And then on my last slide, I have kind of our really, really high level timeline. So as I said, we're in the process of this 5-year look back. And then over the summer and the fall, we will really lean into stakeholder engagement through these issue briefs, focus groups, and planning some statewide gatherings, most likely 2 with different groups, in the maybe September, November timeframe. And then hopefully by early spring, of kind of a year from now, we will be launching that final report. And so it's really important to us that we have partners weighing in at different stages of the process, and we don't want to rush it. And so right now we do have an open call for folks to join the advisory board. We do have stipends available if folks feel like it's extra time outside of your normal work schedule. And I think it'll be about a 10-month commitment, maybe on average 3 to 4 hours a month. So it's not a huge commitment. And some of the perspectives that we're looking to bring to this are, of course, agriculture, aquaculture, urban ag, food recovery, wasted food solutions, food security, access, nutrition assistance, public health. Those are just to name a few, but if you go to the Google form there, you can kind of see all the different areas that we're looking to cover. So if you are interested, please consider throwing your name in, or if you know another organization or specific person that you think would bring a really valuable perspective, we would really love for you to consider that. And ideally, we would have everyone's interest expressed by Monday. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll keep it short for now.
Anybody have any questions for Julie? I can't see you all, so you have to just unmute or put them in the chat if you do.
Nessa, I have one question.
Yes, David.
On the Relish Roadie, a few years ago, they put out the calendar. Remember that project? 2 groups got together, I think Rhode Foundation. At that time, I wasn't as aware of the different organizations and what they were all doing, but I think Relish Roadie was the one, and it was for food events.
Was it edible? Was it edible roadie, perhaps?
It may have been. Yeah, that could have been. And there've been a few projects like that have go on and then they just kind of disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if that's going to be part of the process to figure out if they want to bring something like that back.
Was that a calendar of like public meetings or just?
I think anything that was food related,
events?
like if it was a food event. We're working with a bunch of people in the state on the Right Pulse project, which is to bring new information resources to people in different ways. And that's one of the things we were looking at bringing back is part of the database we want to build is to have food events. So if somebody's doing a food festival.
Yeah, why don't you and Julie connect? Julie, maybe you can send your email directly to
sure.
David so you guys can connect about that. It definitely sounds like a good thing to speak more about. And David, maybe you want to consider joining the advisory board to bring those interests to the advisory board conversation. I'm looking forward to being on the advisory board, and I definitely encourage other folks on the call to consider putting an application in by the deadline, especially people who have lived experience of inequities in the food system. I, definitely would love to see those voices heard all along this summer and fall stakeholder engagement process.
What I'm going to do that I got to do for Commerce, because I was going to their meetings, is I'm putting together all the different projects that we're looking at and have started, or, want to work with state government to at least consider and work with. And so I'll send you that list, and then you can see the food. And I've gone over this with people in the council, with Caitlin and some others, so they know some of what we're talking about. But I'll send that to you, and then you can
Thank you,
figure
David.
out,
Yeah.
the best way we can work with you. Or
That sounds great. And I put my email in the chat.
great, thanks.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments for Julie about the Relish Roadie process? Okay, then I'll just say thank you so much, Julie, for giving us that update. I think it's really exciting. Having a food strategy in the first place, starting in 2017, has been really amazing for the state. I'm looking forward to reading the look back and being part of the process that you are leading to kind of set the course for the next years, helping to make our food system more just and resilient. So thanks again. We're going to turn now to a policy update. There's been an awful lot going on at the State House around food recovery, and we're very fortunate to have Max DeFaria giving us that update. Max is our new Senior Program Associate for Food Access and Nutrition Security. Max has been with the council for a while, but is new in this role, and I'm happy to hand it over to you, Max.
Thank you, Nessa. Hi, everyone. So as Nessa mentioned, today I'm going to be leading us through a brief review and update on the food recovery landscape and the legislation that's affecting it at this moment. So first, let's talk about why we can't afford to be wasting food in the first place. The Rhode Island Community Food Bank reports that last year, approximately 31% of Rhode Islanders were experiencing food insecurity. For Black Rhode Island households, that number soars to 43.2%, and for Latino households, that raises up to 46.6%. These people need food, and when we let food go to waste, we're leaving people hungry. Secondly, the central landfill is running out of space. Current projections say that it will be full by 2040. That's only 17 years away. 17 years is not a lot of time. And if we remove that food from the waste stream, we'll also be able to avoid the negative environmental impacts that come by continuing to feed the landfill with food that could otherwise be recovered. So in order to address all of these issues, Rhode Island needs comprehensive solutions. These solutions, which are documented here in the EPA's food recovery hierarchy, display from top to bottom the best ways to reduce food waste. Second from the top, after reducing the volume of surplus food that's generated, is to donate that food to feed people. Once that food is no longer viable for human consumption, we can continue to move it down the other parts of the hierarchy that can dispose of it in a more environmentally friendly way. But for today's conversation, we're going to focus on donating that food to feed people. So when we're thinking about recovering the surplus food, the donating organizations typically ask two primary questions. What is my liability if something goes wrong? And is there a way to offset the costs associated with donating? So in order to ensure protections for organizations that are donating in good faith, the modern food donation liability protections came into being in 1996. That's when Congress ensured civil and criminal liability protections when donating food that's apparently wholesome to nonprofits that would then later distribute that to food insecure individuals. Earlier this year, Congress actually extended those protections to include qualified direct donors, as well as covering donations at zero cost or at a Good Samaritan reduced price. Rhode Island has taken it a step further to lead the charge in 2019 to not only cover direct donations before the federal government was, but also to provide liability protections for food that is past the best by date, if it's determined by the wholesaler to still be in good condition. So together, these laws provide substantial protections for donating organizations that are donating apparently wholesome food in good faith. The other question of addressing the costs associated with donating food are tax credits. And in 2015, Congress passed the PATH Act, and that act incentivized businesses to donate eligible products using enhanced tax credits. However, as many of us know, local businesses typically struggle with accessing these kinds of federal benefits, especially cumbersome it is for small and local businesses. And as of today, Rhode Island has not offered state-level tax incentives for food donation. However, as I'm going to talk about next, there are two pieces of legislation, one in each chamber, that could change this. So the two bills, Senate Bill 517, introduced by Senator Ilana DeMario, and House Bill 5803, introduced by Representative Carol Hagan McEntee, would both provide tax credits for donations by qualified taxpayers to nonprofit organizations. The Senate Bill 517 has not yet been heard before the Senate Finance Committee. Has not yet been heard. Could we have everybody mute, please?
I think that sound is coming from Eugene. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. So Senate Bill 517 has not yet been heard before the Senate Finance Committee, and the House Finance Committee has heard testimony on House Bill 5803. They heard it last Thursday, where the committee then held the measure for further study. So 2 months remain in this year's legislative session for the General Assembly to take further action on either of these pieces of legislation. And we encourage folks who are interested in staying up to date about these bills and other bills impacting our food system to check out the Rhode Island Food Policy Council's bill tracker on our webpage, and I will drop the link in the chat. And now I would love to open it up for any questions.
Jeannie or Jean?
Now, when they talk about qualified taxpayers, are they not talking about supermarkets? They're talking about regular folks?
The definition of qualified taxpayer being used in both pieces of legislation would cover both supermarkets as tax-paying organizations and individuals. Are there any other questions? Great. If not, I am going to turn things over to Randy Bell-Humer of the Rhode Island Department of Health's HEAL Program Administrator to hear more about food recovery for food access and security. Randy, take it away.
Thanks, Max. I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. So we have Dana Siles from Rescuing Leftover Cuisine and Ava Agudelo from Hope's Harvest. So I'll tell you a little bit about Dana first. Dana has been a professional wedding, event, and portrait photographer since 1998 and saw the need for food recovery in her industry. In 2014, she co-founded Feeding Our Neighbors, an initiative to educate fellow event professionals about the law and need for donating excess food after events. Dana quickly learned that one of the biggest obstacles was transportation. So in 2017, she joined the Rescuing Leftover Cuisine team in order to help make food donation a best practice for commercial kitchens and professional chefs who experience surplus food. Dana helped lead the Massachusetts branch of RLC to its success and launched the Rhode Island branch in 2021 as a Rhode Islander herself. Dana is involved with several community efforts, including Boston's Food Access Council and the South Coast Food Policy Council. And in 2022, Dana was elected as a council member here in Rhode Island for our Food Policy Council, where she aims to foster long-lasting partnerships among community stakeholders and work with policymakers to make consumable surplus food donation easier and more beneficial for businesses, so they will be incentivized to donate it, not discard it. Dana is available for public speaking commitments to educate professionals and businesses about the laws, the tax incentives, and logistics regarding food donation, and for schools, universities, and businesses and other groups about volunteering, not only with Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, but with any nonprofit doing impactful work in their community. Thanks for being here with us today, Dana. And next, we have Ava Agudelo from Hope's Harvest, who has worked with beginning farmers, restaurants, retailers, farmers markets, nonprofits, and hunger relief agencies to improve community food security and bring about a food system that works for everyone. Ava started the National Incubator Farm Training Initiative through the New Entry Sustainability Farming Project. She served as the FINI, which is now the GusNIP program officer at Wholesome Wave, supporting incentive programs at farmers markets across the US. And most recently was the Assistant Director of Programs at the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, administering the federal nutrition programs and supporting Rhode Island's statewide network of food pantries and meal sites. She holds an MS from the Friedman School of Nutrition and the Friedman Nutrition Science and Policy School of Nutrition Science and Policy at Tufts, and is a former member of the Rhode Island Food Policy Council as well, and sits on the board of Osmwakin Farm. Ava founded Hope's Harvest in 2018 to mobilize volunteers to harvest and distribute surplus food from local farms to hunger relief agencies. And as of 2022, Hope's Harvest is now a program of Farm Fresh Rhode Island and includes farm-based food recovery, contracting with growers, and surplus purchasing, all for the purpose of serving the emergency food system. And thank you, Ava, also for being with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to both of you just to start with a 5-minute overview of each of your bodies of work. Dana, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, everybody, for having us. And I have to say, I'm really loving Jean's fellow dog audience participant, who I'm going to be focused on, I'm sure, as I'm speaking here. So my name is Dana, and I'm the Partnerships Director of Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. We are a nonprofit food rescue organization. We're a national organization, and we've recovered over 10 million pounds of food nationally. I actually joined the team back in 2017 because, as you know, in my bio, I was really struggling to try to make connections kind of within the events industry that I've been a part of for so long to make food recovery a common practice. And transportation and logistics was really that key ingredient that was missing. And that's why I joined the team. What I love about our organization is that we very heavily rely on modern technology to streamline logistics. And then we also crowdsource community members as rescuers in order to, really get the job done, to be able to bring that food from point A to point B. Our rescuers are definitely the heart and soul of our organization. There's no doubt about that. On the back end, what we do is we match food to need based on very specific criteria. So that could be geography, schedule, storage capacity, and then also we do our very best to be able to match cultural, religious, and nutritional needs and preferences. So whenever we get a new food donor, we're kind of making those matches, and then we create an event on our calendar for food to go from our food donor partners to our nonprofit partners based on that specific criteria. And then our rescuers go on our online calendar and sign up for what we call rescue events. So once they sign up for a rescue event, the information is, downloadable on their end so that they can access the point of contact, all the instructions, et cetera, to be able to pick up the food from the donor and bring it to our nonprofit partner, making no stops in between. So the process is very, very simple. And that said, in order for food recovery, and I don't even mean just with RLC, but the entire movement, in order for it to be successful, it needs to be streamlined. It needs to be cost efficient, time efficient. It needs to be easy for food donors to be able to donate food. It needs to be easy for volunteers or even paid staff to be able to participate. And it also needs to be easy for nonprofits to be able to receive the food, which could very easily be overlooked. But our nonprofit partners, they're juggling a million balls all the time. So we need to make it easy for them to receive the food. It's equally important as making it easy for everybody. And that's really why I love RLC and why I joined the team, is because we really do all that heavy lifting. We work out the logistics to make it easy for everybody to participate. Leveraging the technology, our donors, our nonprofits, and our rescuers all have their own dashboards. They can easily schedule, cancel rescues. They can see their real-time social and environmental impact. Our donors can download receipts, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is a great program. And, on my end, I joined the team in 2017. I really was very anxious to get us going in Rhode Island as soon as possible. But I wanted to learn how to nourish an existing seed before planting a new one. And the few years of experience that I had in Massachusetts really helped me understand all the logistics. So I was very excited to be able to start the Rhode Island branch in 2021. And since then, I'm really happy to report that we have 168 rescuers that have rescued food and brought it to our organization partners. And that's a combination of volunteer and paid rescuers. All of our rescuers have the option of being volunteer or paid. Pretty cool. And we've done that through 1,700 plus food rescue events, which is really what I find just the most amazing part, because the average food rescue is maybe somewhere between 20 and 40 pounds. So we're doing small amounts because we don't have a minimum or a maximum requirement, which is really, it just addresses so much food. And as a result, we've been able to recover over 50,000 pounds of food. We actually just crossed that 50,000 pound mark just a few days ago, which I'm excited about. So we've been able to pick up this food so far from 21 businesses and deliver it to 41 nonprofit partners. And actually, if you go to the next slide, you'll even see some of those metrics so that you can kind of get a better visual on that impact. But, I feel like we've only scratched the surface. I also feel like teamwork makes the dream work. And, everybody here in this virtual room can play a part in our success, in the success of Hope's Harvest, which I'm excited to hand this off to Ava. And really just for the entire food recovery movement. There's really great organizations in the space, Means and Hope's Harvest and We Share Hope and, other organizations that are just so vital to the success of the entire food recovery movement. And I really believe that, the issues of wasted food and the issues of food insecurity can't be tackled by one vantage point or by one organization alone. And that's why the Policy Council exists, because we're addressing these issues and many more from so many different vantage points. And we want to address all these vantage points and see how they work together to be able to address the big picture. And I'm just really excited to be a part of that, and just looking forward to seeing what comes of this conversation. And just thank you for having us. That's it.
Thanks, Dana. I'm going to pass it over to Ava, and then I'll ask you both some questions and open it up to the audience.
Thanks so much. And thank you, Dana, for your kind words. I love working in the space with you too. So my name's Ava Agudelo. I'm the founder of Hope's Harvest, which is a program of Farm Fresh Rhode Island. We work on all hunger relief efforts at Farm Fresh. So when we first got started in 2018, we were just doing gleaning, and gleaning, for those of you who don't know, means we go out to farmers' fields and we harvest food that would otherwise be wasted, and we pack it up and we distribute it safely to hunger relief agencies throughout the state. So that was the core beginning of the work that we did. We found that, as Dana said, there's a huge amount of interest and appreciation from volunteers for the opportunity to do something really tangible, to go out into farmers' fields, see the side of Rhode Island farms that they don't always get to see, and do something really good for their community at the same time. And there is a huge amount of food that is not being harvested on Rhode Island farms, which is always, I think, a little bit of a surprise to folks who don't realize that we have a lot of farms in Rhode Island. And I know this group knows that, but there'll definitely be folks who are like, really, what farms in Rhode Island are you going to? Like, well, there's kind of a lot. So, we have been doing a lot of gleaning since 2018, but we also expanded into surplus purchasing contracting, which was beneficial. We received a LASA grant to support our surplus purchasing and contracting in the very beginning. So some state support for that. And then we also run a program called Farm to Food Pantry, which is federally funded, where we are able to have hunger relief agencies purchase food directly through our Market Mobile platform, which is really great. And then we also source produce and pack boxes for the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program. So all in all, this is the sort of farm to food assistance pipeline. And there's lots of ways to do that. Within the realm of donations specifically and gleaning, if you wanted to advance to the next slide, we have been able to recruit over 350 volunteers. It's up to over 7,000 hours now, which I just calculated the dollar value of that with the new federal volunteer rate. Dana, I know I'm looking at you. I know you do that too. And it's over $75,000 just last year worth of volunteer time, which is pretty impressive. We've altogether recovered about 852,000 pounds of fresh, healthy local fruits and vegetables. We will have a party when we get to 1 million. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I promise you, you're invited. We've worked with 48 farms across Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts, and we've distributed that food to 48 hunger relief agencies serving over 35,000 unique individuals per month. So we're super proud of those statistics, and feel like this is an essential service that we are able to provide, not just to farmers, but also to agencies and also to the volunteers who want an opportunity to give back and contribute. And everybody in this system is really committed to service and really committed to making a difference for their community and making sure that everyone has access to the food that they need to be healthy and nourished and thrive. So that's kind of the overview. I know Dana gave more of like a kind of background on, we do this and then we do this and we do this. But functionally, what we're doing is we're hearing from farmers when they have product that's available, and we're providing an intermediary role where we work with the farmers, the volunteers, and the agencies to bring everybody together and connect them all. So that requires physical infrastructure. We have trucks and we have cold storage and we have a lot of different kinds of software that all have to talk to each other. And then we have staff that need to physically go out and get that food, pack it up, put it on a truck. I think of that as why we can't be replaced by AI, because you do have to move the food around, right? That's an essential and important part of what we do. So, we're very, very happy to have all the different types of participation and support that we do, and excited to answer questions.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to start with a question off script that I have about, I think probably more with rescuing leftover cuisine. Are we able to look at gaps by geography and need?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. It's amazing because Rhode Island, I mean, we have so many, we're known for our restaurants, we're known for our hospitality. But there's also a lot of need in the very areas that we have the most food. And the biggest
Mhm.
needs as far as actual people who need food are definitely Providence County, in the areas of Woonsocket, and also on Aquidneck Island, like Newport has a very high rate of food insecurity. Um, that said, there's also a lot of food in those areas. So the fact is there's no loss of food. It's a matter of there is a loss of food recovery and logistics in these areas to be able to get from point A to point B. Does that answer your
So
question?
it does. And so with that said, can you talk a little bit about the barriers and the pain points that still exist with regards to logistics and recovery? So you mentioned Newport. I mean, I can only imagine the weddings that go on down here on Aquidneck Island, for example, and with the need, like say the Martin Luther King Community Center, one of many organizations. Um, can you talk a little bit more about what some of those barriers are?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk from a policy standpoint, from or an entire community standpoint, as far as like all of us being stakeholders, everybody, all of us in this room. And I can also talk more on the nitty gritty on RLC side. So, as far as statewide, I call it pie. We need more pie, and who doesn't love pie, right?
Mm,
So we need more and better policy. We need incentivization. We need
mhm,
to incentivize businesses to do the right thing, and we need engagement, which also encompasses education, right? So when it comes to policy, that could be bettering our date labeling laws. It could be even more fine tuning our liability protection policies. It definitely could be strengthening our organic waste bans. Currently, those bans only encompass recycling, but maybe they can also include redistribution, right?
mhm,
And then there's also animal feed and tax benefits. There's a lot of policies that we can do better on here in Rhode Island, some of which
mhm,
we already have strong policy, some that we have weak, some that we have none. Okay.
mm,
Incentivization, as human beings, change is hard, right? We all as people need to be incentivized to make changes. So if you're asking a business to make a major change, it really helps to be able to incentivize them. So we're really excited about the tax credit. Even marketing, like what if the state of Rhode Island can be a greater stakeholder in marketing the businesses that are doing the right thing. I think that goes a long way. I mean, I know myself as a consumer, I really like, first of all, I always try to go to small businesses, locally owned businesses when I can. But even more so, I really like supporting businesses that I know are donating a percentage of their proceeds to, X or Y causes or organizations, things like that. And then engagement and education. Speaking like businesses could have people like Ava or us or Means or, We Share Hope or other great organizations in the space. They could have us come for speaking commitments to be able to educate their team members, on the importance of diverting food from waste, on the importance of donating food. We have to understand that even though us here in this room, this is an issue, these are issues because wasted food and food insecurity are two different issues, but they're very much intertwined, right? And we can feed more people by not wasting more food, right? And
mhm,
also have a much better environmental footprint, right? But here's the thing, this is not new to us. All of us in this room, we've been doing this for a decade, maybe more, okay? But it's still new in the overall space. So we need to keep that in mind. And educating people within the food industry space, I think would be a major step. And then, there's also a lot of other things that I can say, but I want to make sure I give Ava time to answer this question too. But as far as like on the RLC side, the biggest barrier would honestly, it all comes down to funding. And I'm sure Ava and pretty much any nonprofit organization can attest to that. It comes down to, for us on our end, we got the technology, we got more rescuers than we have food to recover. And we have more organizations who need the food, than we have that we're able to get the food to currently. So we've got the logistics down. We just need more food donor partners.
mhm,
We need more businesses on board to do the right thing.
Mhm.
And every organization has its own bottlenecks, its own this, its own that. That's ours, right? But I don't want to talk about just RLC. I want to think about big picture, right? Which is why I wanted to kind of preface answering that question with pie, because we all love pie.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that
Yeah.
answers that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dana. And Ava, I wanted to ask you the same question from your standpoint, looking at barriers and what exist for you.
Yeah, I think that everything that Dana said is excellent and accurate, and I 100% endorse. I think that the costs associated with food recovery, which I spoke to a little bit in our introduction, we're paying for trucks, we're paying for insurance, which is ungodly expensive. Staff to run trips and coordinate those logistics. And those are really all things that it requires complex reasoning, advanced problem solving, ability to negotiate many competing priorities. So those resources are really essential. It's not something that works well with only volunteers running it. It really needs to have professional coordination that's trustworthy. And so I think that when Dana says funding, and I'm remembering we just had a conference this past weekend, and this sometimes gets we bury the lead a little bit, where we get into the nitty gritty of our program operations and we want to talk about these different things. And ultimately, to grow, we need more resources. It's pretty straightforward, really. I would also say, Dana mentioned getting more donors on board. And I do think there's an education component. We have encountered some bias with some growers. Like, we have amazing farm partners that we love working with. And we've also encountered some pushback with some growers saying, quote unquote, those people should be buying food without a real understanding of the landscape of hunger relief work right now and how many people are experiencing food insecurity, and that it's actually their friends and neighbors, right? It's people in all parts of the state. It's folks who are working multiple jobs. It's folks who really are not actually able to access that food in any other way. And I think that sort of foundational misunderstanding that someone's choosing to perhaps access free food when if they had any other option, they would not be doing that. So I think that any kind of support around making that case to all of our growers in the state that this is something that's really essential. The other thing that I want to bring into the conversation a little bit is our work is weather dependent. So that's not necessarily the case with prepared foods, but with farm-based food recovery, if we have a drought, which we did, if we have flooding, which we did, we're there to sort of pick up the pieces when things go awry. There's going to be too much or too little of something when there's these extreme weather events. But it's really necessary for people to recognize in those moments that, the larger questions around climate change, our environmental landscape, what have you, are impacting this work as well. So I just want to make sure that that's out there.
Mm-hmm. I had another somewhat unrelated question, Ava, on the video that we had the opportunity to view that was part of the agenda for today. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of that 15-minute piece. And you were interviewed, and it was I hadn't thought about, the piece at Johnson and Wales where you actually take all the different parts of a beet, not just the beet, and that's used in soups and all sorts of different things. I was wondering if gleaning eventually will involve with Harvest Kitchen at Farm Fresh, taking some of the parts of a plant that we would not really think that we could make food with and make food with it. Is that something that is in the works in the future?
It's such a good question. I really appreciate you asking. So we have done some research. We did a survey with hunger relief agencies where we asked them what specific types of processed products they might be interested in for their guests. And we gave a series of options around not just the type of product, but the preparation and the packaging to see what would be most useful. And so we know that there are certain things we have quite a lot of. We have a lot of butternut squash, we have a lot of apples, we have a lot of potatoes in Rhode Island. So with those 3 items, what could we potentially do that would allow agencies to access that local product year round? And we got really great, really interesting results that we've been thinking about a lot. And the new facility at the Farm Fresh building, Harvest Kitchen, is designed to be producing items for an institutional market. So if we wanted, sort of family-sized cut and cubed butternut squash, or what we found was folks were really excited about stewed tomatoes as an option. And that's something that we also, if depending on the weather and the year, we can have a lot of tomatoes potentially. We asked about broth, which was the idea for sort of offcuts. So we asked about veggie broth. And there wasn't actually as much interest in that, which was surprising, but I wonder if that's something that folks have a lot of experience making on their own, potentially. But there was a lot more interest in stewed tomatoes, butternut squash products, for the most part. So, but really, really great question. And we definitely are thinking about that and how to make that accessible, for sure.
Really, really cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I feel like a community of practice off of the Heft Brewing right now. I'm super excited to, with Max, go back and listen and think about, as Dana had mentioned in the beginning, what our next steps can be with regards to this work. I want to turn it over to the audience because I do see some hands raised. So I apologize if I don't start in the order that the hand went up, but what I'm seeing in my screen is Vernon and then Rachel. If you want to come off mute.
Sure. Thank you for taking my question first. So this one's directed at Ava. So with this with this equity and inclusion movement sweeping the nation, how do you feel about the new cottage food bill and how that could be a more equitable resource for new food producers?
Well, that's such an interesting question. It could use a little help thinking about how that's connected to food recovery. Can you help make that that link for me, Vernon?
Oh no, it wasn't connected to food recovery. It was just like a thought I had. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. I think it's a great idea. I think any opportunity for people to start small businesses is fabulous. And I think that the more we can bring our food system to be more connected in our communities, gives us an opportunity to support growers or producers. And in this case, to, meet the cultural needs of their communities as well. And I guess I can try and make a little bit of a connection. We have tried to work with all different types of community organizations. And there was a question in the chat about, whether we could partner with public libraries. There's questions around early childhood education and how we can bring more local food into what we have started to think of as a market, which is the hunger relief market, right? That is able to utilize these products at lower cost, or is able to access them at lower cost while still ensuring that the farmers and the growers are getting paid. So if a cottage producer has a relationship with a local farmer and wants to incorporate that crop into some type of product, I think that's a really great opportunity and a really great linkage to bring our local resources more connected to their communities.
Yeah, just my thought was with your expertise in the food system, you would have a great answer, and you did.
Thanks, Vernon. It's a great question. It's super interesting.
Rachel, you're next.
Hi there. I have a question for each of you about engaging different sectors or the way sectors engage in your work. And I guess my first question for Dana is thinking about if there's been a conversation among the hospitality industry, the event industry, whomever, who would be on the, I guess, donor end of your system about food service workers as a food insecure population and how to make that connection between the people who are actually serving the food and the food that may end up getting donated.
Awesome question. Thank you for asking that. So if you look at, and this is nationally, I can't speak to specifically the state of Rhode Island, but nationally, one of the largest groups of people that are benefiting from SNAP and who need the most help are people who work in the food service industry, which is very sad and very scary, I feel. Now, there was the 1996 Food Donation Act, which was the Emerson Act, that did not protect the liability, civil and criminal liability protection for businesses if giving food directly to people who needed food. It only protected businesses when giving that food to organizations like Hope's Harvest, like RLC, et cetera. However, the 2021 Food Donation Improvement Act was actually passed in January 2023, which allows businesses, or I should say qualified direct donors, as it's referred to be able to donate that, apparently wholesome food, okay, as identified by the law, directly to people who will benefit from that food, which means that food now can go to their staff as long as it is donated by a qualified direct donor, meaning like in their case, maybe a ServSafe certified worker on their behalf. So I think that there's growing opportunities, specifically within the events industry and the restaurant industry, to be able to provide more food directly to people who will benefit from it.
And is
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Do you
right.
feel like that conversation is being had at all among the food service industry?
Great question. And like, I'm going to be very transparent and a little bold and say, I don't think enough or at all. I think that the law was passed, which is great, but I think now we need to educate. Now we need to increase awareness, to the businesses that can donate that food and to the people who are eligible to receive the food. Because it's a crime that this food is being discarded unnecessarily when people who are struggling to make ends meet would be able to benefit from it.
Thank you. Okay, so then another different question for Ava, but also about sectors, and this might just be a flat out no, but has there been any conversation in Rhode Island about the issue of bycatch as a wasted food source?
You should ask Diane Lynch about that. I am not an expert there. What I will say very briefly is that we are working very closely with Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation and with NAMA and African Alliance around getting more protein into the emergency food system through fishing and through supporting apprentice programs. So that's how we're incorporating fisheries and seafood into our work, but Diane is the expert on this.
I'll just mention, in addition to what Ava has said, there's a program that the Commercial Fisheries Group is participating in. They've really invested in it, called Seafood for All. And yes, they are incorporating bycatch as best as they can. And they are paying a market rate. Obviously, bycatch doesn't have as high a value. And the limits, I think they're doing a great job of growing it slowly. The limits really are in terms of just the consumers knowing what to do with those fish, because that's the reason they're bycatch, is that many people don't know how to fix them, but they're working around that. And there are consumer groups who do know what to do with that fish, so they're trying to connect with them. So yeah, there's movement on that.
Thank you.
Next hand up was Kim. Kim, are you still with us?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I put my comment in the chat, but that's okay. I can say it. So I had just written that nationally there's becoming a much bigger focus on the term nutrition security rather than just food security, so that we're, looking at not just getting people any food, but making sure that they're getting healthy food. So I'm just wondering, from the recovery side, have you looked at, what kinds of foods you're getting, how helpful they are, and if not, do you think that would be something that would be beneficial to measure? Because it might be something that we could get students to help measure or something like that. So just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
You want me to answer this one first, Ava?
Well, I put my answer in the chat, which is basically we're just harvesting fruits and vegetables, and there's not really a big question around whether
Oh,
those.
sorry,
nutritious.
you said that.
So I
Sorry
feel
about
like
that.
it'll be more
Yes.
interesting if you answer it.
Got it. I just didn't want to overstep. Okay. So on our end, we pay very, very, very close attention to exactly that. It's not just about food access, it's about food justice. So, I don't know that we've ever redistributed shelf stable items. If we have, it's been very little, even just nationally. The overwhelming majority of the food that we redistribute has like a 24 to 48 hour shelf life and needs to be either consumed or frozen within that time. So, that said, in certain areas, like I'll say in Massachusetts, we have a lot more food donor partners that are providing like really, really, really high quality, very culturally diverse, nutrient dense foods. And we need more of those types of donors here in Rhode Island. So we're always paying attention. We're always in touch with our nonprofit partners. We're in touch with them literally every day, to a degree. And that really is the ultimate goal. It's not just food access, it's food justice, which is, nutrient dense, enjoyable, appropriate on a cultural and religious level food.
Thanks, Dana. I'm going to keep moving us along here because there's so many hands raised. Maria was the next hand raised. Are you still with us? Maria, you want to come off mute? Okay, well, if you come back, we'll circle back to you. How about Jean? Jean, you had your hand raised.
Randy, I think Jean's question was addressed in the chat by Ava. Yes.
Great. Okay. How about Blaze? I see your hand is up now as well.
Yes, thanks everyone. Let me lower my hand as well. So one question that I had, I remember from my time going to public school in Rhode Island that part of our school lunch program, when you would get school lunch, you'd sort of be mandated to take a fresh fruit or something. And I'm curious, I remember also seeing a lot of that just going right in the trash. And there's certainly, some places that could go. So I'm curious if there's any work being done with the different school vendors that provide the school lunches to sort of have a separate spot for those and do some maybe reverse logistics down the line to get those back to the table.
So yes, there is actually the recycling club program, the Rhode Island School Recycling Club program, which is not an official partner of RLC, but we're very much in touch with them and we work with them kind of, not officially, so to speak, but they're fantastic. And I really think that, not to sound cliche, but I think that teaching the children to do the right thing with the food and be able to separate it from the get-go is going to help change our system. I also think that it shouldn't be mandatory for children to take food that they're not going to eat. So I think that could be done in a more strategic fashion in order to reduce waste from the get-go. Or for our organization, we only pick up at businesses or institutions, not from individuals. So my joke is don't trust my cooking, right? But we will pick up from a school, we will pick up from a business. And if that school is properly handling the food and that food has not been plated, then we can recover it. So if that apple is not placed in front of that student, we can recover that food. So we really would like to work with schools even more on a deeper level. universities, you name it, high schools, to be able to reduce wasted food from the get-go.
Thank
Ava,
you.
anything to add?
I will say that there was an organization that was working on this a few years ago, and the person who was running it actually moved to Colorado. And I just want to highlight that as sort of like one of the challenges in the space is that if there's interest and effort on the part sometimes of one person or a group of volunteers, or there can be a moment around the thing, and then if that energy isn't there anymore, it can sort of fall by the wayside. So I do think it's really important to institutionalize and to sort of build these programs and continue to build them as things that have a lot of more widespread support, widespread awareness, so that they can continue on and become more, because these are big sticky problems that we're talking about. The school food waste it's a big challenge. And it's actually not, it seems like an easy one to solve, and it's actually really complicated. And I know we have folks here who could speak to that better than I could, but we need folks who can continue to work on these challenges over the long term and sort of build ongoing. Jessica Petrolia put her hand up. There we go.
I was refraining. Dana was doing a really good job, and so are you, Eva. But I just have to say that to tack on to what you're saying, that I mean, you're right that the issue of momentum and resources, right, is the main thing about these programs. And so when schools are offering a fruit and vegetable that is part of a federally required meal pattern, it's not necessarily something that we're going to be able to affect at the local level on that regard, but what we can affect is the momentum and the resources that we put into the program. So schools are asked to meet these regulatory requirements on a shoestring budget. When we do things like invest in healthy school meals for all, which if anyone doesn't know is being heard tonight in the House Finance Committee, so please go testify. That brings dollars into the program that schools can then use to reinvest for things like sustainability coordinators, which is something that we out of the Department of Education are wholeheartedly pushing people towards, as well as investing in equipment and other resources to support the Rhode Island Schools Recycling Project. We're working really closely with them. So we are making movements in the right direction, but we need to keep the momentum and keep the resources. So anything we can do to support this broader landscape is helpful. And we're having these conversations, I promise you.
I think that is it for questions. I am going to turn it back to Nessa. I know we're way over time, but I think the questions and the dialogue is totally worth it. Do you want to put us into breakout rooms at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Randy. I think it's been an amazing conversation. I do still think we should go into brief breakout rooms because I believe we do have until 3:30.
Okay.
Because I think as many questions as we've had, which has been an amazing amount of questions answered, I'm sure there are still others, and we have some questions that we hope will engender some conversation in the breakout rooms. As you know, with the Hunger Elimination Task Force, when we break into breakout rooms, it's for you all to make a connection with each other, but we also have a facilitator taking notes in each of the breakout rooms. What you share there isn't lost. It is aggregated into a shared document that we bring back to Julie and to Randy, and we talk about action steps that need to occur as a result of the conversations that take place there. So we have 3 questions that we are going to ask in the breakout rooms, and you can see them there on your screen. So I'm not going to read them out loud, but Max has been putting everybody into random assigned breakout rooms. And I think what we're going to do, since it's about 3:06, is maybe still come back maybe at about 3:20, just for a quick report out and a close, and a couple of announcements at that close. So we would love it if you would stay with us for the breakout room conversation. Max, you can go ahead and put people into breakout rooms now. Welcome back, folks. Hopefully you had a great conversation in your breakout room. We wanted to have just a few minutes to give very high level what was going on in the different breakout sessions And I just want to give an opportunity to popcorn it up. So our breakout room leads, if you want to share kind of high level takeaways from what was happening in your breakout rooms, that would be great. And I can start. I think that we were talking a bunch about in school recycling with Rhode Island Recycles and good experiences with that. We're talking about working on both a personal level and a professional level. So wanting to kind of address our own biases about what types of products we may buy in the market and trying to combat a sense on the part of American consumers that if it has a bruise on it, it has to go in the garbage rather than, cutting the bruise out. As well as on a professional level, we talked about institutional procurement and needing to reduce food waste. Betsy, if you want to share that resource for everybody that you put in our chat, that would be great. And we also talked a bit, Andrew was able to share with us information about connections between grocery stores and food pantries, specifically in the area of meat that had reached its date that's being frozen and donated. So a lot going on. And Diane, would you like to go next?
Sure. We talked about how Nourish Our Neighbors, which is a program at Hope in Maine, is doing some work with recovered food. And then we also talked about how the one of our members, Jeanette, had worked in the restaurant industry and with restaurants, and how really the bulk of the restaurants probably in the state don't really understand how to donate their food. They really don't understand the new regulations and how that was a huge opportunity in terms of education, and also what Dana was talking about, making it super easy for them. And then we talked about individual consumer waste, which Nessa, you touched on as well, and how I had just read, and Dana confirmed, that really the single biggest area of waste still is the individual household, the individual consumer, and how that's really requires an enormous amount of education and sort of changes culturally in how we think about the food that we buy and what we do with it. So I think that's the bulk of what we covered. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Randy, would you like to share, do a high level share out next?
Sure. Thanks, Nessa. So in our group, we actually had someone from the East Bay from a CAP agency talking about some of what they're seeing with their clientele. And no surprise that the cuts that have been made most recently with SNAP have had a big impact on the community. The cultural appropriateness of food is important in that community, specifically it's a Portuguese community. And also we're able to make a connection between some of the resources through Farm Fresh Rhode Island, since they were in our breakout group with this particular CAP agency. So something that's been echoed quite a bit today is the continued need for education, awareness, outreach. I think that we have community health centers, CAP agencies, oftentimes who aren't aware of the resources who are out there. So I feel like we need to make a list of all of the gaps as far as the different audiences who we need to educate and what we need to educate them on. I think there are assets as much as we know there are continued needs for technical assistance and funding, and the list goes on and on. I think there are a lot of assets that many in the community can take advantage of that perhaps aren't aware of.
Thank you, Randy, and thanks for highlighting the education piece as well. Julie, do you want to give a high-level report out next?
Sure. Yeah. So we kind of continue the conversation about schools and waste, and that oftentimes it starts further up the supply chain. Going back to how meals are regulated. So the example was given that there's a requirement for using whole grains, but the food service management companies say that the kids don't want to eat the whole grains in every meal. You know, so figuring out just how to continue to advocate at that, around the federal policies. And then also that even if there are supports like a recycling, you know, food recycling or food compost program in the school, it doesn't mean that these students will actually still compost. Doesn't mean that the actions sometimes can contradict, even if the supports are there. And so, you know, we talked about maybe like figuring out ways to scale successful programs, and perhaps the Rhode Island Farm to School Network could be an outlet for that. And then there was also some thoughts on like how to better connect with other folks in the supply chain. So like farmers, there used to be a program where that was an example of a pig farmer taking scraps for food waste scraps. And so like, are there ways to kind of connect farms to schools on that front? And then also thinking about available state and city-owned buildings and how those could be used for points of aggregation and distribution.
Thanks, Julie. And Allison, thanks for acting as a facilitator today. Do you have quick takeaways that you wanted to share from your group?
Yeah, our conversation was very in line with the other groups. A lot of our members highlighted the need for more education from children to individual consumers in households, and promote an idea of having a statewide initiative around food waste. And then we also talked about shared tables at schools for kids to drop off fruits and vegetables or whatever they didn't eat, and share with other students that might need some extra food to their meal.
Thank you so much, Allison. Thanks to all the breakout room facilitators. Again, we're going to take those notes. They're not getting, they're not going to gather any dust. Max and I are going to be working on bringing those to Randy and Julie, and we will provide you with a summary document before the Q3 meeting. So just a couple of last reminders. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We'd love it if you wanted to share your most important takeaway from today, personal or professional. If you want to leave that in the chat, we'd love to see those from you all on your way out. We also want to provide a friendly reminder that the annual Rhode Island Food Policy Council Network Survey is coming out very soon, probably in another week or so. So please keep an eye out for that. Getting your input in that survey, getting Hunger Elimination Task Force members' input in that survey is really critical. It helps set the stage for a lot of our policy work and other work to come. So this concludes the second quarter Hunger Elimination Task Force meeting, about maybe 10 seconds early. Our next meeting will be on August 15th. More details to come, but we are planning on having it be an in-person Hunger Elimination Task Force meeting. So please mark that date on your calendar. Note that it will be in person, and we will be in touch with more details soon. Thank you so much for joining.